Sure.
Okay, here we go. Hi, my name is Maridee, and once again I'm sitting here in the nsquared office in Sydney with Dr. Neil. And today we're going to talk about the surface shell. So, Dr. Neil, what is a surface shell?
It's a great question. So, I guess if you walk up to a surface unit that's deployed in the real world, you will interact with the surface shell. And the surface shell is, well, it starts off when you first approach a surface unit, you'll see an attract application, and by default that's the water application that you can kind of touch, and it gets ripples and stuff like that.
That blue-green with the pink.
The kind of blue-green, with it looks like a little pond, and you can touch it in the water ripples, which is kind of cute. And it's called an attract application because it attracts people to touch it, and water is one of those things that people feel very comfortable kind of dipping their fingers into. They know it's safe, so it attracts people to touch it. And on the four corners of the surface unit on the screen, there are what are called the access points, and those access points let you touch them, and they go into the launcher mode. And the launcher is that kind of carousel that presents all the applications that are installed on the unit, and you can touch one of those applications, launch it, and then be running that application. Launcher is an interesting application in some ways. It's very I like to call it a 180-degree application because it either faces one way or the other. It's not actually a fantastic surface application, and the surface team probably hate me for saying that, but it isn't a fantastic surface application. It's very one-sided. Once it's launched, you're kind of viewing everything from one side. It's not and it's, to some degree there's some sense to that. You don't want three people trying to launch an application at the same time, but it doesn't present the information on the screen to everyone sitting around the screen equally. And so it has its downsides on that level. Like I say, there is a reason for it. So that's what you'll get if you run the application. If you walk up to a unit that's running in user mode or in deployed mode. As a developer, when you're running your application, you'll be running in admin mode, and actually the shell you'll get is the standard Vista shell. And in order to go to the surface shell, you need to run surface shell, which will be a shortcut on your desktop. Before you run surface shell, you need to run surface input, because that's what switches on the cameras to receive the input for the touch. So the shell is the first point of contact. It's the user experience of the entire unit.
Okay, so once, say, I've written an application, how do I get it into the launcher?
Right, so that's kind of, there's a lot of people like toying around with little applications, and then they push F5 on Visual Studio and it launches on the Surface unit, and they play with it. But then the next question is, how do you install it? So the first thing I always say to people is you must build an installer. So building an installer is like the number one thing to do, and in that installer you create an XML file that sits in a certain folder that the shell looks for, and it's a program data Microsoft Surface shell, something like that, V1 programs. There's some convoluted, anyway, it's in the documentation, but you put your XML file in there, and the XML file describes to the shell how to present your application in Launcher. It describes the full qualified path of your application of the XE, describes the full qualified path of the icon that appears in the Launcher, and the full qualified path of the preview icon, which is the slightly larger icon that appears in the launcher when your application comes into focus. And actually that larger icon doesn't just have to be an image, it can also be a video. You can play video in that as you go into preview mode, and that's kind of cool because you can show people how your application might function, or give people hints as to how to use your application in the video. So there's some of the application suite applications already do that, where they play a little video showing what the application will look like.
That's cool. So why, back to the attract mode for a second here, why would you want to build your own attract mode?
You may want to have a branded attract. You may want to have an attract mode application that is specific to the context of your environment. One of the things I talk a lot about in terms of Surface is the contextual awareness. And that's not just contextual awareness of the application, but also of the location that you're installing in. So if you're building an application to run in a museum, for example, you may want an attract mode application that is relevant to that location, that is contextually aware and attracts people. The kind of people that are in that location will be attracted to that type of attract mode application. It's something that you can do to customize the look and feel of your unit when it's not running an application.
Okay. And there's another thing you can do too to highlight an application in a certain location, and that is to run the device in single app mode.
Right, and this was certainly one of the most common asked for features prior to Service Pack 1 and came out in Service Pack 1, is the ability to run your application as the only application ever running on that surface. You essentially turn your Surface unit into a kiosk, a single app kiosk. Now you can launch other apps from your app, and there's an SDK sample showing you how to do that. And again, it's a set of registry tweaks. So attract mode, you change the XML file that you use for the install and change some registry, edit the registry, edit some registry settings, and you do the same for single app mode. So when you want to go your app to run in single app mode, you have to install your app, same as before, but then you set your app, or you set the registry settings to only run your app when Surface Shell boots, and then you never get the attract, you don't get the access points, and you don't get the launcher. It's just your app running, and that's it.
Okay, so that could be really useful for people.
It's certainly good for retail type scenarios. Some of the apps we're working on at the moment for retail, we certainly see they will run as single app mode, and they may have different aspects to the application. There may be multiple things you can do within that application, but we will be in total control. We'll never let someone go to launcher and run Paint or run photos. It's a fully branded experience, and it will we will be in total control over what runs on the Surface unit at that point.
Great, that's a great feature of the Surface.
Yeah, it's, as I say, one of the most requested features prior to Service Pack 1 and now available in Service Pack 1. Makes a big difference for those types of scenarios.
Very cool. All right. Well, anything else you have to say about the Surface Shell?
Not really.
Okay.
It's still good.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks.
And we will see you next time with more information on the Surface.
Bye.